After I finished my service as a lone soldier in the Israeli army, I realized this was my defining moment. It's time for me to build success, create stories, and the financial freedom that I never had before. I used to be trapped with money, and now it empowers me. Since then, I've developed a multi-million-dollar financial advisory business, a podcast that has been featured on all the global media stations around the world. One of my favorite things to do is educate people on the mindset to build resilient wealth, build success, and have fun doing it. In my show, you will not only get best-of-class tips, amazing stories, a bunch of laughs, but you'll also get a mindset shift from a family of people who have come from nothing and will help you be ready to succeed. Welcome to the Resilient Riches Podcast. Have you ever gone inside what the actual media is telling you? Have you ever spoken to the person or ever seen the person who's actually creating and crafting media strategies? Instead of using clickbait, Tzvika Klein, who's the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, actually uses truth to build his audience. But his audience, who you would think is in Jerusalem, is actually across the world. He's gone through unbelievable journeys. He's going to talk about his Qatar journey and what actually happened and how people can leverage media to help grow their brand and what do's and don'ts in order for you to do so. Zvika Klein on the podcast today. You're going to have a great time. We're going to have some laughs. Just his humor is a little different than the average bear, but it was a lot of fun and a really exciting episode. So thanks everybody for listening, and please enjoy. Welcome everybody to another episode of Resilient Riches. Today I'm bringing somebody from Israel, but not just anybody from Israel. We all read Israeli media. We all see Israeli media. We all want to follow Israeli media. So why not bring the person who actually delivers Israeli media, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, Zvika Klein. We're really excited to have you on. We have a lot of financial questions, but also you've had a little bit of drama over the last 3.5 years. So I'd love to also talk to you about that. Tzvika, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I know you've been in media your entire life. Can you first give us a little context about you and then get right into what you're doing right now?
So, hi, Yair. I wouldn't say my entire life, but, most of my career. Yes, I was born in Chicago. Sometimes you could tell by the accent, but not too much. Yesterday was 40 years since we moved to Israel. We had a big family celebration. So I've been to the Jerusalem Post for almost 4 years, not even 3.5 years. Before that, most of my career I was in Hebrew media, writing about the connection between, basically writing about Jewish communities around the world in Hebrew and kind of connecting Israelis to diaspora Jews. And now I feel like it's kind of doing the opposite. And also during certain periods, I was an advisor to the president's residence in Israel on Jewish diaspora affairs. Did some TV, did some radio, things like that, podcasts. So
here you are. So Israel sucks at their brand strategy. Everybody talks about how the Israel narrative is getting their butts kicked. Let's go into that before the financial questions. How can we flip the tables? How can we turn it back so we actually get in control of our own narrative? Like, we'll do stuff and people's like, yo, you did something else. And it's like, no, that's actually not true. How do we get back control?
I don't know if it's getting it back because I don't know if I ever had it, but it's funny. We're such a smart nation, but in certain things we're just not successful. So I think I think one lesson from October 7th is really there were I would say tens of thousands, if not more, journalists that came to Israel for a pretty long period of time after October 7th. But really, the only functioning PR spokesperson's unit was the army, the IDF spokesperson's unit. And, the prime minister's office had like a few people here and there. They were getting volunteers that spoke languages to help with media. And someone reached out to me, like, if I had any ideas. And I said, we're not a third world country. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we could pay people to do I didn't understand the whole concept of it. It was kind of like the Yiddish word schnorr, right? It's like, we're begging or asking people to volunteer doing this PR. Happy I'm making you laugh there. One of them actually asked me if I know how to get them contacts at APAC. I said, if you're working for the prime minister, you know how to get to APAC.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that they were asking, and then you brought all these like pop stars coming in, and they're like advocating for Israel. I was like, this guy's at what? When did he get this job? Like, this guy was homeless 25 minutes ago, and all of a sudden he's the spokesperson for like the country, and like he's still speaking like, and people are bringing him in, asking their opinions. It's very very confusing. So so. Do you think that Israel's strategy going forward has become more united, or do you still think it's this fractured approach?
No, I think not. I mean, I think in general, the months after October 7th, there was a lot of unity and a lot of people speaking the same voice, a sense of purpose. Now, almost 2 years later, there's so many elements, but I think the fact that, most families or many families were affected directly, even if we're not talking about people being injured or killed, but even just the fact that I live in an area where I was one of the only men on the street living, on our block for months. Like, I was the guy that would, like, the kids came with their bike and I had to, like, pump their butt. I had to, like, fill up their tires. So, luckily, I'm not a very technical person, but that was, like, one thing that I was able to do. And,
you're the best. You're the best looking guy in the whole community. You were the sexiest you've ever been.
He came to me. Anyways, yeah, but because all the fathers were in reserve duty, and that has a huge effect on families and on individuals. My daughter, she's going up to first grade, and she was in her preschool. And she was like the only kid whose father was home, like not in the army. And they were getting all these special goodie bags and whatever presents, and like she didn't get it. She was the odd one out. You know what I'm saying? So like, I tried to convince her that it was a good thing that I was, home every evening, and she didn't.
Did she say to you like, "Daddy, get to Gaza? Like, I want the goodie bag." Yeah, no.
Come on.
Yeah, like, stop being so American.
Yeah.
And get to work on it.
Yeah.
So on the financial level, how does a paper who has to generate ads and generate revenue through eyeballs, how do they do the balance between the truth versus actually generating what will click and people will click through?
If I tell you, I had to kill you. But if I really had to tell you,
if you had to, I mean, you would not be in the like. I'm not so. Your daughter told me not to be threatened by you. By the way,
exactly. Touche. Okay, so it's interesting actually, because a lot now is gone to Google Discover, one of the platforms of Google, and one of the rules is like you have to go according to certain rules if you want your content to be promoted and to get those eyeballs you were saying. And one thing they say is don't use clickbait. Like, if you use clickbait, it will know to shoot you down and like to not promote you. So I think, so obviously, yes, there are sites doing that, more tabloidy sites, and maybe they won't get promoted there, but, they have their other ways to get promoted. We don't do clickbait in general, and I think, it would be easier in a sense, but you also lose your credibility. People, I hate it when I see a headline, I go into the article, and like there's nothing in the article about that headline. And we're almost 93 years old. And that comes with a lot of weight with it, and, positive and negative. But one of the things is we're, sometimes even the younger people on my staff are like conservative, not politically, like conservative on like what they would be willing to do to put a headline on a story that may not get as many clicks because they don't want to be too sensational.
So they're trying to not go as viral as they should. Or they don't want to be
from like a business perspective.
Yeah. Or from a person's perspective looking in.
Yeah, I mean, but also right. So like, but viral is not always positive, and
Correct.
so okay, so you get those clicks, but what about a year or two from now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Agreed. Are you now iced? So companies are constantly asking us to, hey, how do we promote ourselves? How do we grow into the next level? How is the best way a company or a person who's trying to build a brand utilize media and find the right media and advertising platforms in order for them to grow?
Well, I think it's really, first of all, who's your target audience? And I think it's actually really interesting because, people look at us as an Israeli media outlet, but most of our readers are actually right next to you, next door, or I don't know, the next block, because about 60%, 60, are in the United States. And, occasionally Canada or whatever. So, and then only 15%, 1 5, are here in Israel. The rest are the rest of the world. So, putting our print edition aside, if I could, I would put it even more aside. But we still have a daily newspaper. But you know, our focus is on North America. So when it's 7 a.m. your time, our traffic starts going up, and you see it like very clearly. Where they're coming. And obviously, you can also see where people are from, including like what neighborhoods. Saying like what neighborhoods are more popular than others. So you have to know, who the target audience is in order to determine, is it a media outlet, or an influencer that gets um, to your constituency or whatever. But I think in general, um, yeah, you have to be very focused on that, and also, what's your goal? Are you selling? Are you trying to get, people's recognition? It's very, it's very tricky, and then you really have to know what you're doing before you even approach any, platform.
So, can you give us just a quick 5-step overview of? You said people really have to know what they're doing. Can you give our listeners a 5-step overview of what they should be looking out for before just throwing money at something like this?
So if my brain would work like your brain, I would be in finances and stuff like that, and giving 5 tips and like building it in an organized fashion. But I'm like very ADHD and in media, so I will just like throw out different things out there.
Shoot it on the wall.
Yeah. I was always jealous of those that would be like, okay, there's 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, not me.
No, you have to write articles to get the 5 things out. We write that in bullet points. It's a very different story.
Well, yes, but you'll see many media outlets nowadays will put bullet points there,
Smart.
right? Like the 5 important things of this article. So your question was the 5. How to determine,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I mean, so it really depends. Are you selling something? And then according to that, I think I'll give one maybe kind of. Some people think that like it's all moved on to influencers, right? Why should I buy like traditional ads or promoted content when I could like pay an influencer who like the people I want to get to are following, and they'll speak out this message, or I don't know, they'll wear the T-shirt that I want them to wear, which is sometimes could be effective, but I think definitely if you want to make it to policymakers and you want to make it to decision makers, you can't ignore the classic, old school media, because whether it think tanks or universities, congressmen, they need a reliable source for something, right? So if you're doing research on some medical, I don't know, medical treatment, or I don't know, evidence for something, you want to give it the serious platform. And I think also one thing is nowadays traditional advertising in these platforms is not always the right answer for you. Sometimes buying, an article or even a social media post from that outlet or something, where it will say it's promoted, but that may be more effective than just putting a banner. Like, there aren't as many people today saying, "Oh, I want to buy banners on your site." It's more, like other types of stuff. Yeah, one thing in our business model is conferences. So people identify with the brand, and they want the platform, they want the name recognition, and they'll pay a certain price, and they'll speak at the conference, they'll buy an article or whatever, something like that. And sometimes for them it's more, that's worth more than just buying ads in a print newspaper.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're utilizing the leverage of the brand and the legitimacy of the brand and using that for it. So I actually think that's a really valid point. When somebody is picking out actually where to post and where to grow and where to partner with, it's really crucial to understand what their brand is representing. So you are representing, for example, Americans reading or English speakers reading Israeli information. So if you are someone who, let's just say, is trying to sell property in Israel to Americans that are moving to Israel, it's a great place for you. Yeah. If you are somebody that's trying to promote investment into Israel, great, that's a great place for you. But if you're somebody that's trying to promote, let's just say, something in Israel for Israelis living there, that's not a great, it's just not the avenue for you. Right. So it's really just, you're not going to get anywhere. Leads or whatever, right? Yeah, it's just not going to be worth your ROI. So I think just eyeball. So we did this one thing. We did a ad a few years ago with this. We thought this was going to be like the best thing ever. So they're like a massive influencer, like massive influencer. And we advertised with them, and we got like one lead, and it was like a joke. And they got on that one YouTube video 270,000 views, like easy. Okay. It was just a regular video, and then they put us on the podcast. We probably got over 1 million views, and we got one lead. But and we're like,
was the purpose the lead, or like
the purpose was we thought we would get 1,000 leads from this one thing because their brand was just so big. But our messaging didn't actually translate to what the brand was all politics. We're financial, and they're like, why are you even talking about financial? It just didn't make sense. So I think people waste too much money just on media, but because they don't know and they get kind of sold. So yeah,
sometimes people would be like sometimes people, I used to do PR before I was a journalist. I didn't tell you that before. And my boss, it was mainly for like religious communities and stuff. And he was saying, people want, when they, on Saturday or on Shabbat, when they go to shul, they want someone to walk up to them and say, I heard you on the radio, or I read this, whatever, right? Like, or in the country club. Right, like that's what people want, but that's not always the right thing, right? Like it's nice and you feel good and whatever, but at the end of the day, like it's not necessarily the right decision.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't always help. So, just one thing on a side point, you had a very interesting Qatar trip. Do you mind shedding some light so our audience can know what happened and also how everything got cleaned up? I know they didn't pay for your hotel, but they basically forced you in a hotel.
Forced me into a hotel, yeah. So I mean, I think one cultural difference is that like in Israeli media, it's more, I would say, like people go on either junkets or are invited to certain countries. The country pays for the flight or whatever, and if you have credibility, like you also say it. So I actually wrote in the article that I was invited and whatever by the Qatari government. It was a few months, I would say maybe half a year after October 7th, maybe a bit more. And the idea was, Qatar is very obsessed about its image, and it invests lots of money in many countries around the world, mainly the United States, also Israel, into people seeing it as a legitimate country, as it being more modern than a fanatic or extreme. And I wrote an article, and to make a long story short, because it's a very long story, usually you don't have to tell people who invited you, like you have your own sources and everything. But basically, now that it's all public, turns out that the people that invited me, I didn't even realize that they were working necessarily with Qatar, were potentially or possibly also working for the Israeli Prime Minister, while they were also doing PR for Qatar. What did I do wrong? Not very clear. I was called in for a testimony. It turned into an investigation. But luckily, it took a day or two. But I received support from almost, I would say like 95% of Israeli society, from right wing to left wing, extreme right, extreme left. Um, a right wing TV channel had an ad every hour saying, until Tzvika Klein is released from house arrest, we will not stop broadcasting this ad, which was kind of cool. I only saw everything afterwards, so whatever. It was like,
You're a
it was
big
like
influencer.
watching videos, like back in the day. Um, and no, but also like people from Haaretz, very left wing newspaper, were very supportive. So and I also, so basically I did one big interview after my face being on TV, not me, like face, picture of me for like a whole week, top headlines. I spoke for 20 minutes. It was a very in-depth interview. I cried in prime time Saturday night when I had to speak about my kids who had, my wife was away. Anyways, sometimes it helps to cry because people relate to it. And I really received like a lot of support. And I think that sometimes it's important to do that because you think that like, that's it, your career's done, you're whatever. And no, like, I'm saying, if you really believe in something and you did nothing wrong, people were like, this nerd, he's the guy that like, he's making all the money from Qatar. Like, he's stealing, he's whatever. Like, no, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, they accused you of stealing, and then you wrote an interview, and that was the end of it. And then they put you under house arrest.
They didn't even accuse me of stealing. They didn't really know what they're accusing me of. It was contact with like a foreign agent. They're not sure up until today who the foreign agent was. But yeah, it was also a very big lesson about democracy.
How good democracy actually is.
Well, it should be.
Should be is right.
Will be.
Will be. God willing, will be. What would be the last question before my dad jumps in? What would be the best piece of financial advice that you could give to somebody or that you have gotten in your life that you would pass on? Obviously, don't be a jerk.
Maybe I should ask you, what's the best tip you ever got?
I would say the best tip I ever got was to pay yourself first. So instead of paying all your creditors and your mortgage and everything like that, push that all off. Pay yourself first. So at the end of the month, you feel poor. At the end of the month, you have to work really hard. But if you leave yourself and put money into your savings account at the end of the month, then you're gonna all of a sudden spend everything, and then at the end of the month, you're like, well, I don't have anything.
I have.
It's very easy to spend money when you have it. It's very hard to spend money when you don't.
My father told me don't be an independent, like just like working, independendly, because like that's what he does. He's a headhunter for Israeli companies looking for senior managers in the United States. You can speak to him if you want. They say we look alike. But he was like, he's been working on his own for like a few decades, and he's like, never do that. Like,
yeah, it's not for the weak stomach entrepreneurship,
right.
But it is a great journey. I'll let my dad jump in because he's got some questions, and he's coming right over.
All right, thank you, Yair, for finally letting me come in here and ask some questions
Oh my
on.
God, you talk so much.
I can't even. Can you see me? Okay.
What are you gonna do? Yeah.
What's that?
I was kidding. I was saying he speaks so much.
He does. It's sometimes hard to get a word in edgewise, so I'm happy at least he gave me an opportunity to speak to you. Nice to meet you. An interesting story in Qatar. And just to go, I've been around a lot longer than Yair, of course. I remember the Jerusalem Post being very left, to tell you the truth, like years ago. Like, when I was in Israel from 83 to 86 in yeshiva, I got married there. And you never read the Jerusalem Post unless you wanted to have some skewed view of, especially the Orthodox. So it's super interesting that it's changed a lot since then.
I don't know. How do you see it now?
Well, it
what do you
sounds
see?
like it's more of a balanced kind of approach. It seems like right now.
Okay.
Uh,
No, it's
would you?
interesting. I ask because really, I get feedback sometimes that it's too left wing, and sometimes that it's too right wing. And I actually like that because otherwise it would be, it wouldn't be good in my opinion. So I mean, it really depends on the period of time. I was born in 1982, so I can't speak for that period of time. But there were periods of time where it was more to the left, more to the right. I would say now um, we try and be more center, but I think I like to say that we try and reflect Israeli society as a whole, and Israeli society definitely after October 7th is more to the right. Whatever you want, you could
No,
call it
absolutely. I mean, I was in Israel
and more
last.
traditional, more conservative. So it's not Likud, it's not right the ruling party necessarily, but
I
it's a
heard some
general
people
thing.
complaining they don't know who's Orthodox and who's not anymore because everybody's wearing tzitzis. So
That's
they,
an interesting phenomenon. Yeah, in the army, during the war, some of them weren't wearing a kippah, but they're wearing the tzitzis, um, and and they're not even necessarily religious, but like they connected to it, and they're singing these Jewish songs. And we did a survey at the beginning of the war about people's attitudes towards religion and Judaism since October 7th, and we saw a huge spike in also those, of self definition of how you describe yourself. And many people, moved from being secular to being traditional, which is a very broad term.
yeah, it was very interesting. But you mentioned something at the beginning of the podcast. You said at the beginning you were more connecting. You saw your role more as connecting Israel to the diaspora, but now you see that's reversed.
Right, because when I was working, basically I worked for Hebrew media for a decade. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was one of the only people really writing about Jewish communities outside of Israel. And up until, me like covering this and doing it in my own way, it was like, okay, people wrote about the Jewish agency, right? Or like it was I don't know, nefesh benefesh. Like what are you going to write about? And I actually thought that to me, covering half of the Jewish people outside of Israel, right, pretty much, was the personal story. So it could be about sports, it could be about business, it could be I did two stories at the beginning of my career about the surfing rabbi. One was from Australia, one was from the West Coast. One was on skateboards and one was on surfing in the sea. And just trying to connect to those people and those stories. And I don't know, the guy who's a rapper who converted to Judaism and made Aliyah and moved to Israel. People connect to that type of a story more than than just speaking to a talking head, a Jewish organization, which I respect and I think are important. But I think there's a lot of people don't really know, and I think also in the other direction, by the way, a lot of American Jews consume media information, whatever, from sources that don't really expose Israelis.
It's interesting because we found also that when we first started this podcast and right after October 7th, there was a lot that Israelis aren't that interested or as aggressive with social media as they should be. And I'm just as you were talking, it just occurred to me you're the startup nation, it's tech. Because there you see an ultimate, an immediate result. You see an immediate product. There's an immediate benefit. But with social media, and I think our enemies have learned this over the time, and certainly, can discuss, this is something. It's a long-term type of strategy, and as Yair mentioned, like sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes it happens 6 months later. You don't even know why. So maybe that's the reason why the Israelis, the powers that be, haven't really embraced it, and they're looking, like you said, for a free handout.
We're a smaller nation. Muslims, Arabs, whatever. Like we're talking about billions, and we're just we're just a few million, 16 million,
But even in spite of the smallness, I think that there's just the attitude is that it's not, and we've interviewed a couple of social influencers from Israel, and it's just the attitude is such that it's just they're not, we want to, but can you schnorr me some free advice or some free ad? Because I just maybe they just don't see their results. But another point that was interesting to me, first of all, I wanted to know, you were the only man not in the army. Was that you were too old? I mean, you weren't able to go in, or what was?
I was exempt for. I actually volunteered into the army because I had some medical issue. I was actually going to volunteer into doing actually some sort of work that is very needed that you just mentioned like 30 seconds ago. But then I was offered to be the editor of the Jerusalem Post like a few months after, and I felt that was definitely at least as important for sure. More.
So I mean, you're running the Jerusalem Post. So we are a financial podcast. We are financial guys. So always the joke is, how do you make us? With maybe we'll see. We'll talk. Okay. But the joke is that how do you make a small fortune in Israel is that you have to bring a big one. So it's always puzzling to me, just to take an overview of the financial Israeli society. Like, how do people even make a living? And some of the reports I've seen is that the poverty line is even greater now than it was. I mean, it just seems like, is it all just government coming from money from the government? I mean, besides the tech industry, which seems to sell like for billions and billions of dollars, which to me is unreal. But how does this like the regular guy in the street does? We have nephews that have a glasses store, and when they're at the war, they were struggling.
Mm-hmm. Right. Where is your store?
In Beit Shemesh.
So a glasses store.
Glasses store in Beit Shemesh. In one of the new malls.
Because it's interesting, I have a neighbor who they have a few like glasses stores in Haredi communities. And they said that they were almost not affected by the war because of their location. So it's interesting. So obviously you mentioned the tech industry, and I think it's growing and highest or almost highest per capita. And there are so many types of jobs in those fields. But you could also work at a bank, or you could work in real estate. A lot of Israelis are in real estate. There's so many other things. And also, I think also though, in general, don't forget that, being Jewish in Israel, you're not sending your kids to private day schools, right? So we're not, there are pros and cons to that. Most of it's public, but, you're not paying tens of thousands of dollars per kid.
Correct.
Which is a big deal. And I think also sometimes, certain depends where you live and who, a bunch of things, but sometimes the standard of living is different from country to country, and then people are just okay with it. I mean, I know a lot of people who are in education, and they live happy lives. They're not going on vacation abroad every year, but
they get by, they manage.
But I think the war in general has influenced so many sectors. It's a very big deal. Even though they say after wars, right? After wars, you usually have the economy becomes even stronger. But people, definitely people who have stores, as you were mentioning, stuff like that. So some of them are in reserve for hundreds of days throughout the past 2 years. And that has a huge effect. People with restaurants, a lot of them have been closing. A lot of people also, it's kind of like COVID in a way. A lot of people went to Gaza and came back, and they don't want to do what they were doing anymore. And it's so some of them are able to find something, some are not. And
interesting. I mean, I always knew that it was a very high inflation rate. And taxes were always very high, so it was always very difficult. But it's great to meet you. I'll pass you back to Yair.
Tzvika, since you're a new influencer after your very well orchestrated Qatari experience that you coordinate.
I'm a huge influencer. People pay me thousands of dollars per tweet
to put on different types of lotion on your nose and cheeks and ears. Just for that. Like you're a lotion influencer is what I was told.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. All right, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Men's makeup.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a new market soon. Where can people find you? How can people get connected with you? How can people follow you?
Okay, I'm on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram. Not so much TikTok at the moment, though I should be. It's my name, Tzvika Klein, Zvika Klein.
Great. And
if you're
Drew,
not from the US, it's Zvika.
just want to make sure my kids are into the Wiggles now. So
listen, people are watching you all over the world. You know,
that's we were actually one of the biggest podcasts in Uzbekistan for a little while. We had Uzbekistan,
really?
Netherlands, yeah, no joke. Philippines, South Africa. U.S. was only a couple episodes because we had a few big hits. But Uzbekistan, like people were wearing Resilient Riches T-shirts. I don't know if you knew that in the Uzbekistan community.
I didn't get one.
That's because you were in under house arrest actually. Sorry,
okay.
you were trying to build blow up your fame.
So
but
when you coming to visit, you should come visit.
I come visit all the time.
Okay.
We were supposed to be there in Israel in the summer for a month, but the Persians, you know how they do.
Yeah, things happen.
To the Jews.
Here and there.
Yeah, exactly. Tzvika, thank you so much for coming on, and hope everyone enjoyed this episode. A little different than our normal briefing, but really appreciate you coming on and really enjoyed your insight. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Registered investment advisor, doing business as Klyman. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. The views expressed are those of the speakers and may change without notice. All investments involve risk. Yair Klyman is an investment advisor representative of the Partners Wealth Management and SEC registered investment advisor doing business as Klyman Financial.